Alrighty guys, we have a forum, so we can go ahead and get started. This is our last meeting of the school year, so you have to think how quickly the year's gone, but I think we've had some really good accomplishments, and part of today we'll be talking about some of that. I'm in control of the. We got it. Okay, next slide. So this is our agenda. We're gonna, as always, adopt the meeting minutes from our last meeting. That should say March 1st. We're gonna approve the proposed agenda. Open up for public comment if there's any public comment. Board member comments. Elise and company are gonna give a debrief from the community forum. We don't have a date for our annual committee report yet, but at some point we're going to have to give a report to the BOE. So we wanted to brainstorm as a committee what we've accomplished and what we want to highlight in a presentation to the board. SOCA updates, talk a little bit about an upcoming call for new members. Review meeting dates. We have our meeting date scheduled for next year just so folks can plan ahead of time. And then hopefully talk about like anyone who's interested in being involved in selecting members for next year, being part of our ad hoc membership committee, and then end by electing officers as well as celebrating particular committee members that are going to be rolling off of the committee. So we have a packed agenda, so we'll go ahead and get started. Is there any public comment?
No, thank you for all your good work.
Thank you. Okay, so let's turn it over to David.
One thing I was really glad that we had the public forum. I think that's really, a year ago we had the forum in response to a racist incident, and in this case it was more to continue to hear from the community, and I was just very, very glad that we did that. On the Board of Education side, certainly we're very much in the budget season, and I don't think there was a tremendous amount of requests for new funding for racial equity initiatives. I'll share as an individual board member what I have a particular eye on right now is there was a request for $10 million in new funding for special education, and $3 million of that has gone away in the latest recommendation. And so that's something that I want folks to stay engaged on. My hope is that we don't cut that $3 million of recommendations in terms of special education. So I guess my ask is that everyone look at the budget documents. They're on board docs for Wednesday. It's really the only business item for the board at the upcoming meeting on Wednesday. And I don't know, I guess everyone evaluate it for yourselves. And if there's things that you'd like to speak out on in public comment or emailing the board, I hope you do. Yeah, for me, it will be a particular emphasis on special education this year and trying to preserve that additional funding. I think those are my two most important updates. I think a third update, we had a really interesting, we had an excellent presentation from the student member of the board. I wonder if Lucas is online or not. He might not be on right now, but really excellent presentation from the student member of the board about student voting rights. And I think that, I don't know, I would be interested in perspective from the Racial Equity Committee as the board deliberates on this. I think that there's, I think that there's ways in terms of ensuring that we're hearing student perspectives and kind of ensuring, I'd be interested if there's any thoughts and feedback from the Racial Equity Committee on this. So that could be something to look at as well. But yeah, I'll leave my report there now.
questions or comments for David?
David, I did have a question. I know that the student member of the board, there were discussions, I think in one of the articles Shanita sent out. Thank you, Shanita, for always sending us the articles, by the way. You
Yes.
are on point. I wanted to ask a little bit more, if you could expand on and unpack the discussion of the board member having rights to vote. I believe that I read that somewhere, and can you tell us a little bit more about what happened with that?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was, so at this point, the student member of the board is, actively engaged in discussions at the dais and in the agenda, but their vote is recorded simply as, their vote is recorded, but it's not part of the majority, right? We have a 7-member board, takes 4 to pass something. The student member vote doesn't contribute really to that 4 out of 7 that it takes to pass something, but in other counties it does. And that was the meat of the presentation, that there are counties where the student member has full voting rights, and there's counties where the student member has partial voting rights. And yeah, just a discussion on whether we should move towards that. Yeah.
And I just realized I forgot to, a motion to adopt the minutes from our March meeting. So, do I have a motion to adopt our March meeting minutes? A second? All in favor? I'm so excited to move forward with our agenda. And I'll turn it over to Elisa to talk about the community forum.
So our community forum was last week. That we first started off with Soka framing us for the evening. They talked a little bit about what their hopes and dreams were for FCPS and becoming equitable and anti-racist, and what they dream and imagine it to be. Then we turned it over to Dr. Harris and his team, and they had an awesome presentation. I think it was well received from those that were in the audience. We had a ton of public comment. I would say there were a good amount of people from the audience that got up and spoke. So that engagement of the folks there was great. For me, just one of the areas for growth would, I think, be to how can we get the word spread far and wide to get increased attendance for next year. I know last year when we did it, we had a much larger turnout because there were a lot of incidents that had more recently occurred. So how do we make it, because there was an overarching theme of being more in prevention mode as opposed to responsive and reactive mode. So in order to prevent, how can we get more communities members to see the importance of that and come out and talk to us, not just when there's an incident that occurs. So for me, that was an area for growth for next year. And then I'm going to now turn the floor open to anyone who is there to add on to some more areas that glowed and growed in our needs.
We had 11 people to speak. One was a student, so that was very exciting. We got to hear from a middle school student, and we heard from other community members. So that was, to me, a glow.
I think the public comment that we received there was a glow. I know that numbers of participants could be higher, but I think everyone who was there, we were able to hear from anyone who wanted to speak. I thought the public comment was very important for us to hear exactly what's going on in schools, and people were able to speak directly to their experiences. I also feel like there was good, casual time afterwards for people to connect. It wasn't necessarily planned in that way, but I wonder if a somewhat smaller crowd allowed people to feel more comfortable to connect afterwards.
Were there like any specific themes or topics that came up in public comment?
Engagement was a big overarching theme.
Also, there was a theme about the African American Studies class to start a little bit earlier at a younger age as opposed to waiting until high school. Several folks spoke about that.
Wanting to hear student voices.
I'm sorry, go ahead. You put yourself back on mute, Camille.
Sorry. They also talked about wanting to hear more from the students, from student voices. And another theme was the adult bias that doesn't seem to be addressed. So I thought that was very interesting because I captured notes throughout and I heard that several times. The African American studies, the student voices, and the adult biases were the things that came up the most.
Yeah, what do you mean by adult bias?
Well, you know, when people have their prejudices, and unfortunately, we don't necessarily always address it. So people are compliant. They will do what is asked of them. However, it doesn't mean that they believe in what you're asking them to do. One of the students talked about during Black History Month, they learned about Chinese Americans, I think she said. So it was very interesting. And when the student asked, it was like, this is what we're learning this month. So that, you know, that's an example of adult bias. Well, how is that addressed when it happens directly to adult to student or adult to adult? I think, you know, if you're talking to someone who is committed to the work, they will correct. But if you're not, then you indulge. And that, you know, was one of the problems that they discussed.
When you talked about engagement being a theme, was it engagement of students, of staff and administration? What did they mean by engagement?
Engagement.
Talked about parental engagement that we heard from the PTSA. There were a couple of folks there from the PTSA, and they talked a little bit about more like a theme of use us. We want to be community partners. You know, we want to be more involved, and so that piece of getting parents more involved in within the equity work.
Michelle Rowley has her hand raised. Michelle?
So I just wanted to say, to piggyback off of what Dr. Bell said, and I think it was you, Dawn, who said it. One thing that they did mention about the Black and African American study scores, in addition, that same gentleman, in addition to it starting earlier, he did mention the fact that it's currently an elective for only 11th and 12th graders, having it start earlier and not necessarily, because it has so much meat and so much richness in its content, and that's a lot for a senior who's about to walk across the stage, or for a junior who's kind of, you know, thinking about other things to handle at that particular time. So there was a lot of discussion. That one particular gentleman had a lot of discussion pertaining to the Black and African American study scores.
Nothing else, we'll move on. Okay. Yeah, and as I mentioned, every year at the end of the year, usually in June, I think it'll be a little bit later this year, just because there's important budget work and other work going on. We do a report, usually like 20 to 30 minutes to the board that just kind of summarizes the highlights of what we've done for the year. And so we just wanted to spend a few minutes at today's meeting to kind of brainstorm what accomplishments we have this year that folks think are important to include in the annual report. And we're always interested in sort of having committee members more engaged, either in drafting parts of that or even, speaking. So also just your interest in being involved in that as well.
So we adopted the anti-racism policy in November, so that definitely should be included. We also know that they're working on the regulation to go along with the policy. We know that's a work in progress. And I don't know, perhaps maybe some of the presentation that you shared at the community forum, maybe pieces of that might lend itself to being included within our presentation.
Community forum, having that again from a different lens than what it was last year.
If this is not the right time to address it, then I can wait. But speaking of the regulation for the anti-racism policy, like, what's the status on that, and when is it expected to be finalized? When will we get kind of the opportunity to review it?
Is now the time?
What is that?
I said, is now the time?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. All right, so Tyrese, so what's happened, so we sort of shared this during the community forum, in that one of the things that we've been doing is really examining all of our existing regulations in our school system. And we've been enhancing and changing and updating those in order to comply with Policy 117. As we go through examining many of our system regulations, we're going to determine then what gaps do we have and determine whether or not a new regulation is necessary from that. What we have looked at is the fact that there are so many regulations we have in our school system, and so we're going through sort of a reorganization of all of those things to make sure that they all make sense, but we're updating a lot of them to comply. And then when it's all said and done, if there's not an existing regulation that and leaves a gap with Policy 117 that's not addressed, that's where a new regulation will come. And
so is it not, and I'm new to the district, so is it not the case that every policy is supposed to have its own regulation?
And so not necessarily. That typically is the case, yes. However, that's not necessarily the case. And that's one of the things that we're sort of examining now. So we already have a regulation that speaks to educational equity. We have a regulation that speaks to some other equity related matters. And all of our regulations, and many of them in some respect, address many of the components of Policy 117. And so then the conversation we had was, okay, so do we just start off creating a new regulation that pretty much repeats everything we have in other existing regulation, or do we beef up the existing regulation, see where the gap is, and then, if necessary, create a regulation from there? And that's where the direction we chose to head in.
Are we keeping track of the updates that we're making with the regulations?
Yes, yes. So, and as a matter of fact, if we want at a future meeting, I can revisit some of the stuff that we presented at the community forum. But yeah, we have a tracking device. There are multiple staff that's involved in those things, and so, but we absolutely have that.
I think that would be good for the community to see, especially if another regulation is not worked out of it.
Yes.
Simply because you said that other policies typically would go there.
Yeah.
So if we're able to show them, this is why, and be able to step it out, I think that would, be a sign of good faith and, so they know that it is actually being implemented.
Absolutely can do that.
Dr. Harris, I feel in a phone call that I had with you, I feel like when I asked the question, but are parts of the policy being implemented since we passed this in November? I feel like your answer was yes, and you had some specific examples. Are there things that you're able to share that have been implemented or have changed in FCPS since the board passed this anti-racism policy?
Sure can. Let me pull up the presentation. 1 second. All right. Okay, so just to name some of them. So Regulation 400-48, that's our existing bullying, harassment, intimidation for students. Regulation was updated to make sure that the reporting of acts of racism is required and laced through that. That's a piece of Policy 117, the first piece where it talks about attention, collaboration, and action. And so in alignment with that, we updated Regulation 400-8. We also updated Regulation 400-08 that deals with student discipline. And so we just sort of made sure we spelled out the disciplinary consequences for acts of racism and the tiers of intervention, support, and consequences that principals can and should take when it comes to those types of incidences. When it comes to, I'll just highlight a couple of more. So there's a section on Policy 117 that talks about student access and achievement, and it refers to creating measurable benchmarks and action plans and those things. And so there's some programming and some changes that we've made with regards to gifted and talented identification. And one of the things that you'll notice in our board reporting is we report GTE, gifted, talented, as an example, not just only support how different student groups are performing with regards to identification, but how far they have to go in order to make sure that the identification is commensurate with our overall student population. So we revised GT identification process, made sure that measurable benchmarks were very clear and adhered to that part of the policy with regards to advanced placement, GT, dual enrollment. And then there's a couple of other examples. With regards to the piece where it talks about training for staff, so there are this year enhanced required trainings that staff go through dealing with racism, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And so there's a minimum number of training that happens there. We also changed the regulation for 500-38. That has to do with textbook review, selection, and approval. And so that regulation was changed as a result of Policy 117 to make sure that when we are reviewing textbooks and materials, the selection committee must have staff whose primary focus is on the needs of diverse learners so that we can select materials based on that. There's some continued work in that area because when we talk about comprehensive textbook review and all of those things, we're sort of looking at that protocol and that process. One of the things that we made sure was happening when we talk about the Black African American Studies course is that it is an elective, and so students get to choose. And so if you're in a school where you only have a handful of students who want to participate and there's not enough to create an entire section, Then what we've done is we've identified an itinerant teacher so that that course still could be offered to all schools, whether it's in person or through a virtual type of means. With regards to, there's a component in policy 117 with hiring and training. And so right now what I'm doing is doing some training with our human resources department, but then also another layer of that work is relooking at all of their hiring and support processes to make sure they are in line with policy 117, but more so making sure that we are creating processes and procedures that will attract and retain a workforce, a diverse workforce. Let's see, one more thing. What am I forgetting?
I was just gonna say that we did have multiple presentations with all principals where we went over and gave them time to really look at the policy, unpack the policy, think about their work in their school and with their staff and with their students as they implement the policy. So there was dedicated time for them to really take time to look at it. And then there was another one where we actually provided them their school data and they sat with their feeder teams and it was aligned to the data that is required within policy 117. And so they looked at their school's data and they also looked at their feeder school's data to really talk as a feeder school system, like what should they be working on collectively? Because we know we prepared students from pre-K all the way up through graduation. And so to kind of provide a conclusion with regard to across the feeder. And so there was work done where they looked at that data and talked about what can they do. And so there was action items that came from that based on the data that they saw from their schools.
We also looked at the ease of reporting incidences for students in the community. And so now on our reporting forms, there are QR codes. You can go online, you can fill it out and submit it right there online. Or you can go into schools and just get a printed copy and just fill it out that way as well. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just had a question. This may not be the right time for it, but going back to the GT dual enrollment placement, sounds like the SIP plan, like the school buildings, the school improvement plan, is that way, collecting data that way?
Two separate processes.
So they're not, the SIP and the other things are not.
Yes, because so for school improvement processes, one, in those school plans, it's a requirement. This is an added piece as a result of policy 117, that there must be an equity goal within your school improvement plan. Next year, we've added that you must have student voice as a part, diverse student voice as part of your school improvement plan. That's separate than our GTE identification processes. So our GTE identification processes, it really sort of takes control of the identification process out of schools' hands somewhat, because we do system review of the data, and I was thinking about our COGAT system administration of some of the required testing as well. We go through the data systemically, and we say to schools, here are the students that need to be looked at, that need to be identified. And we have that conversation with schools.
Right, that's answered that question. And so what is the implementation of like the training look like? Because like a lot of this is great, like giving principals time to look and unpack it and saying like, this is important, this is our focus. And then like, is it like a trainer models, or who is implementing the training of like looking at this data and saying, okay, this is what, if it's behavioral data, or if it's bullying data, or it's harassment data, or it's, you know, school discipline data, facts and phrases, and like how is it being looked at and unpacked, you know, and also like then trained in a way of like, if you're talking about like white supremacy culture, or people like being like, okay, well, this is like something we need to look at, you know, it's uncomfortable, but like we don't have the right to comfort at this point, like we don't have that right, like, you know, look at things that are, you know, these are what our kids are saying, these are what their parents are saying, and like the the historically marginalized community. And so how's that rolling out? Is there like a office that, I mean, clearly your office deals with that, but like, how does that training get out to the principals and to like, you know, then the classrooms and then impact, basically impact student achievement? Like, how's that?
So multiple layers. One, it starts at the system level. And so Jan, myself, other directors and associates, we come together first and we examine all the data. And we make sure that we clearly understand what are the strengths, what are the challenges, what patterns and trends are we noticing. We identify groups of students that are concerned. We identify schools where there are groups of students where we might have concerns. And then we will support schools from that lens. So then once we do that systemically, then when we bring our administrators together, then we will facilitate, we plan the data segregation and looking at it, we facilitate that ourselves. So that central team, as they're working through it it could be in feeder principal teams or something like that. So we facilitate that training with the principals and train them on here's what you look for. We identify some patterns, help them to think about how their school practices might promote or inhibit some students from performing or not. Then the principals then take that and move their school teams to be able to do it. But in some school teams, it's done with system level support.
So they're looking at you guys, so you set it up for the data checks, and then you look at the barriers, the principals then implement it from there. Like basically, so it's like central office, patterns and trends, you know, you then provide the support through the data, and then you set, here are the barriers, and then they look at it. What is in looking and thinking about, like, you know, these, speaking of the regulations you already have, you know, from the policy, how do you see, you know, collecting that, like, I know you talked about student voice, but like, how do you know, like, what you're implementing is working?
So one, there are quantitative data that we report on a regular basis to the board. And so when you go on board docs and look at the presentation we just did for the community forum, on many of those slides, you'll see links to the actual board meetings where we review those data. But then we also have qualitative data as well, perceptual data from students, as well as from staff, as well as from the community. And so we analyze those data as well. Sorry for the bird walk.
No, it's okay. This is like important information, so it's a good conversation. I'm gonna say, just reiterating Sari's comment. I think especially if there's not like a new regulation that's created, like I don't know what it would be, but just sort of having a document that sort of summarizes. So I think that was a big evidence for kind of recommending the anti-racism, having sort of this comprehensive thing. So I think having some sort of document, whether it's a regulation or not, that sort of summarizes that in one place is helpful in terms of the community understanding everything that's happening, because it sounds like a lot's going on. I don't think everyone's aware of that. And then being able to sort of like track that and evaluate that over time, because we're sort of being able to look at the big picture. So I would just kind of recommend some, I don't know what it would be called, but just having something like that available for.
Yeah, we'll be able to share it. We have something like that.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions about in line on the anti-racism policy before we go back to brainstorming? It's been a good discussion.
And for the purposes of the agenda, I think it's part of the brainstorming for the annual report, right? That aspects of this can
Yeah,
be.
we better understand what's happening. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I should have rephrased that as shifting to like brainstorming other ideas, not that we weren't doing that.
Should there be updates about SOCA as part of the annual report?
Didn't the group go to Montgomery County this year too?
Some weird thing that's up there. And as I mentioned, this won't be the last time to provide feedback, but this is kind of, I think, a helpful starting point in terms of helping frame the presentation. But if folks are interested in contributing, please let us know. We're always looking for volunteers. And our memory isn't great, so I think it's helpful to have the whole group, so you're not just relying on a couple people.
So for the next slide, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Michelle Early to give us a quick update on SOCA.
Good evening again, everyone. So as you can see from the flyer, SOCA will be having their end of year celebration, which will be a block party at Amber Meadows Park. It will take place on the 20th, so not this Saturday, next Saturday, but it's the third Saturday of this month, and it's from 2 to 5 p.m. They're going to be featuring guest speakers, so it's an educational session as well, an education and entertainment session, so all are welcome. I believe we did share out the link to register. It was shared out with the students, and if you look at it, it doesn't necessarily read as though there's a component for adults to sign up, but you are more than welcome to attend. As was mentioned earlier, SOCA has been making themselves very known throughout the community. Even members of SOCA are being hired and recruited by other organizations within Frederick County. So they are definitely making an impact, and this is a great way for them to be able to end the year, to celebrate, and to have just an opportunity to gather with people from everywhere throughout the community. So we do hope that you will attend. Again, it's from 2 to 5 p.m. on Saturday, May the 20th, and all are welcome. And it's free. It is a free event. And some of the funding that is coming for this event is coming from the MSCA grant that SOCA did receive. So that's how they are able to offset that cost. So if you are interested, please let us know. We'll make sure you get that link if you would like to register or have your student or someone you know register for that. But we hope to see you there.
And can I add a congratulations to Michelle for the All-Star, FCPS All-Star Award. So just wanted to say shout out, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so as we look to the future of our racial equity committee, we wanted to take this opportunity to give everyone who's who chose to stay on the committee, who's not rolling off, the dates for the meetings for next year. So if you go ahead and take a look on the screen, these are the dates for the meetings for next year. You'll notice what we tried to do was about every first Wednesday. A couple of them are the second Wednesday due to holidays, vacations, school closures, things such as that. But most of them are the first Wednesday of every month, most. So we'll leave that on the screen because I see folks jotting it down. So we'll leave it for a few seconds.
And there's 7 meetings, so even though in our regulation it says at least 50%, we're hoping that folks who stay on can commit to at least 5 of the 7 meetings. So we really think it's important to have as full of participation as possible at each meeting to make progress. Yeah, and you'll see there's December we don't have a meeting, and then in April we don't have a meeting because the plan is to sort of do a kind of yearly community forum, and so of course we'll figure out the details of that, but that would sort of be the time for that.
Yeah, and like Keisha said, traditionally we've had to cancel that December meeting just due to holidays and school closures and things getting so busy. So that's why there's no December meeting there. And then, like we said in the last meeting that we had, you know, we go through a selection committee process to get everyone's seats on this committee. So we really are asking for people to commit to at least making at minimum 5 of those meetings.
And we'll also send this information in an email sometime this week, just especially for folks who weren't able to attend this meeting, so everyone's sort of on the same.
So on the next slide, within that same vein of meetings and meeting dates for this coming school year, applications, we are already starting to accept applications, all committee applications. Oh, it hasn't gone out yet? Oh, it hasn't gone out yet. My bad. I thought it already went out.
I guess that
It's
was
ready.
one additional thing I could have spoken about in board member comments. It should go out this week.
Okay.
There was, one of the folks on, there was a member of, I don't know, the legal team that was reviewing one thing. Should be ready to go out this week.
Okay.
Should we shift the due date a little
I
bit?
think so. I guess giving
I think we should, yeah.
giving a 3-week window,
When it goes, yeah.
and I don't want to take credit. That was Sabrina's idea when we were saying that it hadn't gone out yet. I think a 3-week window is probably better than a 2-week window. It really does. I feel confident that the Find Out First will go out later this week. I think I would say Thursday is likely, and so I don't know if shifting it 1 week later is wise.
Or possibly right after Memorial Day. Give them, that way, go from the beginning of June.
But don't we have to, I just want to make sure our ad hoc membership committee has enough time to do what they have to do. That's my concern about it.
Right, so there's the June board meeting that hopefully, if we have enough time, we can have it presented for the June board meeting for them to review, to review the board member, for the board members to review the new members. If not, then we could possibly shift it to the July meeting, but that would change their start date, which could affect them being on a committee for a full year term, because then it would be from, like, let's say July 15th, instead of starting on July 1. That would be the only challenge, but I don't think that's a significant challenge, and we can make that clear for the new members.
Can I ask, was the original intention that the slate of new members would go to the Board of Ed for the June 14th meeting?
Correct, and it would be effective, their start date would be effective July 1, so it would run on the fiscal year.
Yeah, so is there still a scenario where the applications are open, that date is shifted a week later, but that this could still go to the Board of Ed in June, right, for the June 28th meeting, and then the start date for new members of Racial Equity Committee could still start July 1?
Oh, there's the June 28th.
Yeah, there's 2 June meetings, June
I feel like that's
14th and
probably
June
more.
28th.
I feel like that would be more reasonable.
So the approval would be June 28th.
We would
I'm
want
triple checking, but I believe there's 2 meetings in June. Yeah.
So could we then propose for the deadline to submit applications to be May 26th? That would give people a solid 3 weeks. Even if it were to go out this Friday, it would give people a solid 3 weeks, and then we have everyone's in prior to Memorial Day. I think that's that Friday.
May 25th or 26th?
May 26th. Is that reasonable to everybody? That's a solid 3 weeks.
And I think there was a question in the chat, maybe it was Artie, on whether current members need to reapply right, the answer is no. The Find Out First is going out recruiting new members.
Yeah, everyone's kind of can do like 2 years and then another 2 years without, like, unless there's, attendance, that kind of stuff. So I think everyone who's currently on our committee who's interested in staying is able to stay.
unless you mark no, because we sent out a Google form to say, state your intention and your intention to stay on or to run for office. And pretty much we got a response from most everybody who was new just now, within the last few months. And most everyone wanted to stay on. So we assume you want to stay on unless you already told us no.
I'm just curious, do you, when we do the find out first, we don't get like people who have already applied in the past? Does that weigh at all for the membership or the selection committee?
No, and Ivania brings up a good point. We have had several folks in the past who do ask for feedback as to why they didn't get selected. So we do a very specific selection process. Every applicant gets reviewed by 2 folks on the committee. So again, that's why we say like we value you all so much, which is why it's so important for us to at least attend 5 out of the 7 meetings. A lot of folks always want to be on our committee.
And then either now or by email, yeah, there we go.
Already asked, how many members are we recruiting? I know Catherine looked at that and sent it out to all
I'd
of
have to
us.
look it up. I don't remember.
Yeah,
what she
and
said,
we'd like to, just because there may be, like, we just want to make sure everyone, like, we don't usually include that number in the fall, just because we want to make sure that everyone has an understanding of expectations, and if there's people who decide they don't want to continue on, it may shift a little bit.
Because, for example, if after this meeting tonight, some of you all say, oh snap, I'm looking at those dates and I can't make at least 5 meetings, I can only really make 1, we might have someone even after tonight who's sitting here and telling us you might not be able to make it. You don't want to stay on for next year. So that's another reason why we just do an all call out to everybody.
And we're looking for community and staff and student members.
Right. So there's the 3 different categories, community, staff, and students. And then we're looking for, Sabrina, on the next slide, we're looking for subcommittee volunteers to be on the membership selection committee. The time commitment for that is volunteering about 2 to 3 hours to review all applicants. Everyone's assigned a certain number of applicants depending on how many we get, so we don't know how many that number is. Every applicant gets reviewed by 2 folks on this subcommittee. So it would take about 2 to 3 hours for you to review each of the folks assigned to you. And then it would take about 2 to 3 hours for us to meet and discuss, because then afterwards, all of us come to the table and we talk about, okay, when I reviewed this person, this is what I saw, this person, this is what I saw, and we all have a discussion that usually goes for about 2 to 3 hours. So we're looking for folks to sit on that committee. RT, I see you have your hand up. You can go ahead.
My question was just, do we at least have, I guess, maybe a quota that needs to be filled for each area, if it's community member or, a staff? Are we considering that? I'm just thinking about, I think maybe we had discussed this previously, but for the volunteers that had applied last year, I think there was some comment around, there was a tremendous amount of applications that came in for 2022-23. So I'm just wondering, I know there's not a number, but is there a number for community members that we're looking for? Is there a number for staff, folks that, would fill the different areas for this collective?
Well, we have a spreadsheet of the members that are on the committee now, and our bylaws ask to try to have a diverse group from the community, so different feeder patterns we try to look at. There are different aspects that we try to look at to have that diverse group, including those community members, students from different feeder patterns also, and staff from different schools. So that's all part of it. So we do have focus areas that we would be looking for, but again, it depends on
where the applications come from and if we can meet some of those opportunities to fill some of those areas. So it really just depends, but yeah, we'll have all those numbers for the membership committee when we know for sure and we get our final numbers hopefully coming in from the committee now as to how many openings we may have. Does that answer
Got
your
it. Thank you. My other question is here for this subcommittee. The time commitment, is this over a few weeks or is this in one sitting, the 2 to 3 hours for both reviewing and then selecting?
So a selection committee would be one time, like a 2 to 3 hour meeting. But we give you, I think the goal was to give folks like a week to review applications before that meeting. And I think with this timeline, we'll have the time to do it. So it'll be sort of like probably a week to review applications are signed, and then scheduling a time after that for like a 2 to 3 hour meeting where the candidates are selected. Because I think we have to send the names like a week before the Board of Education.
We can do it a little shorter time frame,
But a little bit before.
no, yes. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think that would give like a week to review applications, that one-time meeting, then pull that together and make sure to get it to the board approximately a week, give or take.
Is there anyone else who knows if they'd like to volunteer to sit on the subcommittee now for membership?
I'm happy to volunteer.
Thank you. RT,
I put in the chat that I'll do it again as well.
Dr. Bell, okay. All right, thank you all.
Is there anyone else besides RT?
RT, Cyree, and
Neil?
And if anyone decides afterwards that they're interested, just feel free to reach out to us and let us know. And we're happy to include you in that process as well. So we want to make sure that, whoever wants to be involved is inclusive. Now, a very important part of making sure that we continue to move on. We're looking for, so I think myself, unfortunately, our whole set of officers has been serving for 3+ years, and so we're all kind of stepping down. We're not leaving, so we'll still be here as a resource to folks. But we are looking for other members to either nominate themselves or other people on the committee to serve as chair, co-chair, and secretary. So now's the time where we're looking for nominations. We're happy, and if there's any questions that people have right now that they want answered before they feel comfortable doing that, we're happy to discuss that.
Okay, so we'll start with anyone who would like to put their name in the hat to volunteer to run for a secretary/treasurer. You'll notice in our bylaws it's noted as the same position because when the bylaws were created, we weren't sure if we would maybe at some point down the road get a budget from the Board of Ed. It's still a / position. So if anyone at this point in time would like to run for secretary treasurer, we ask that you nominate yourself or someone else.
And currently there is no treasurer responsibilities because we don't have a budget. So really it would be secretary where you would be taking notes.
Right.
So don't think you're wearing 2 hats. Not at this time anyway.
I have a question for anyone who may not know. I know that you all have an REC executive board meeting. When do those meetings take place? Just in case someone may need that information for consideration.
Sure. We usually meet about once a month to prepare for kind of the next month's activities and discuss any ongoing things. That's usually like one additional meeting as well as this year, we started meeting monthly with Dr. Harris, which has been really, I think, helpful, beneficial to both of us, I hope, at least definitely to us.
Absolutely.
To make sure we're connected in terms of what's going on in the school system, and we can sort of update him on what's going on, just to make sure that we're, working together. So those are the main things. And then we, we don't want it to be a complete, we have over the past couple of years been trying to work so that, keeping those extra responsibilities at a minimum, sort of being more strategic, but also trying to bring in members to actually do the work. So it's not just kind of falling on 3 people. And so that's why things like Shanita's important position, which we also need to fill because she's stepping down, came up, because we're just like, we really need to know what's happening in the community, and and try to do it in a systematic way. So that's kind of how that happens. So sort of using those times to think about what are the needs, or when there's times we want to provide public comment, we might strategically talk about it then, or might get input from a member who's like, hey, this is coming up, and then again, working with, or including the larger committee so that folks can volunteer to write that or present at a board meeting. So so it's really kind of being strategic, and just make sure we're shepherding things along and not things aren't falling through the cracks is kind of the primary responsibility.
I'll be using my teacher weight time. I've got all day.
We have a coach volunteering to be secretary.
I was volunteering to have my hat thrown in
And Dawn has been doing an amazing job, so she'll be a great resource to you.
Yes.
So.
She will show you the rope.
And our other great resource, we have multiple great resources. We also have Sabrina, who's does everything. We're like, Sabrina, we have
Who does everything? Sabrina, who does everything?
We're like, we need a room. Are we allowed to do this? So she's kind of
A computer.
she's our computer.
Yeah.
And then we have David, our other board member, who's our board member representative, who advocates for us and makes sure, he's been an amazing support. So you're definitely not alone in the.
Sabrina, are you able to, because I'm not connected to the internet, are you able to go ahead and go into that forum and put folks' names? Okay, thank you. Mine's not connected.
So do we have a volunteer for co-chair? Or chair? One of the two. I'll just throw them both out there. And both those positions work really closely with each other, and so so I feel like they're more of a team than you're in charge, who's in charge, because I feel like we've needed each other because life happens, people are busy. So I think having the support of all 3 of us, as well as Sabrina. Michelle, I feel like you want to get off mute and say something.
She's volunteering. I saw her fan go up.
I'm sorry, what did you just say? It was a fuzzy noise that started after you said Michelle. It's so weird. I missed it all.
Any volunteers, chair or co-chair?
Could you go through the expectations one more time for chair and co-chair, please?
Yes, usually it's once a month meeting-ish, before the full meeting to set the agenda. Just kind of, I think at the beginning of the year, you'll want to set priorities, and we kind of do that towards the end as part of our thing. But as a new committee comes on, we want you, of course, to have the freedom to shift to anything that you guys would think is appropriate. But just really at those meetings, setting the agenda, kind of checking in. So the big things that we focused on this year were anti-racism, community forum, SOCA. So just kind of checking in where all those things stand. So it's usually 2 at that meeting, and then we started doing 30-minute meetings with Dr. Harris, which is a separate meeting, but has been really helpful in making sure that we're aligned and can support each other in the work that we're doing.
Come on, Michelle. I see you want to do this. Come on. I'm right there with you.
Oh, speaking, who is that? Who is that? Who keeps saying my name?
Michelle Early. Or chair.
For one position, vice chair or chair?
I say chair. Go big or go home, Michelle. Come on. She's sitting up here going, I don't know you. What is this?
But there is someone's voice that I do hear that I do know, and I will talk to her later. But co-chair. Co-chair.
That nomination, Michelle.
I nominate myself for co-chair.
Who is going to help Michelle by serving as chair?
All right, we need our third musketeer. Michelle, who do you want to be your ace boon?
See, who am I volunteering today? Where are
That's my favorite way of doing it. It's gotta be valuable.
Artie? What are you doing?
No pressure.
Hi, Artie. How are you?
You know, I full transparency, I was going to throw my name in the hat, but I recently had just found out that I was appointed to the Commission on Indian Affairs for the state of Maryland, and that kicks off in June. And so, thank you. And so I'm not quite sure of the lift for the commission, and so I just need to be mindful of the bandwidth between, obviously, you know, the commission responsibilities. I want to stay on the Racial Equity Committee, and then of course work and all the other stuff in life. So I honestly did want to do, you know, throw my name in the hat, but I had just gotten the appointment letter last week. So I would love to play a bigger role. I just don't know if I can commit to the chair or co-chair position for now.
I respect
So that's what
that.
I'm doing.
Congratulations.
So that's what I'm doing. Thank you.
Congratulations.
What is Tyrese doing is what my next question.
Great minds think alike. Great minds think alike.
I think Tyrese, you would make an amazing, I think you would be an amazing leader for the Racial Equity Committee. I think just based on your profile as an educator in Montgomery County, I'm a Montgomery County kid, so I understand the challenges that you're faced with. I nominate Tyrese.
You accept that nomination, sir.
The second or the third, whatever number we're on, that nomination.
Ooh, you caught me off guard there.
You did not say no right away. That means that somewhere you want to do this.
I do, but much
Yes.
like all, huh?
Run to the light, Tyrese. Run to the light. Take over the meeting. Look, I jumped in. I need people. I want people with me. Come on, y'all.
A lot like Artie just said, like I don't know. I am still working on my national board certification, and I am a little scared about overcommitting. It sounds like, you know, a big responsibility, and I don't want to say that, you know, I'm all in and I'm going to do that and then not be able to do it. And can I think about it?
So Denise, would you be willing to like run for chair and then we could see if we can get someone else to fill? I feel like you've taken over the meeting, so it's like, yeah.
I want to be secretary for a reason, because I want to be able to watch how this works.
Well, we're not gonna be here. Yeah.
And there's no better way. I've found when I join an organization, it's great to be the secretary. You are forced to pay attention because you're taking the notes, and then you kind of figure out how it all works. So that's what I wanted to. That was.
I also I believe that we have so many amazing leaders here, and I feel like Miss Williams may also be an amazing leader and someone she looks shy and she looks like she's not she was not expecting this, but you know, I believe you'd be able to handle that.
I tried her.
Yeah, she tried. I like Artie, I serve on a commission for my city as well. So I'm a commissioner with the City of Brunswick for the City of Finance Committee, as well as I just took a new position working with my church. So I want to do a good job. Nominate me next year. Next year, we'll talk about it.
All right, someone write that down to nominate for next year.
Yeah, we'll talk next year.
Okay, so with that, this is not last or least in any way, shape, or form. I nominate the one and only Dr. Camille Bell.
Okay. I don't know. Am I allowed to do it as a staff person?
Staff person and secretary, Dr. Bell.
Say it again. I can't hear you.
I said I am a staff person as well as secretary. So I think you can do chair.
Oh, Lord. Okay. I'll do it.
And my boss is here with me tonight. So far, so okay.
But slide that camera over to my boss. Like, slide the camera over to my boss so I can see his face real quick.
Your boss has to say something, and then the camera will move to him.
I need him to say something so the camera goes to his face.
So you want me to run behind him? I can run behind him.
Exactly.
But that's gonna love to follow me when I'm not looking. Hold on. No, it's gonna work, Dr. Harris. I'm sorry. I tried.
A couple of thoughts that I have, and I really want to toss to this class. So one, Camille, like Dawn, are not appointed by the superintendent. So they're not one of the superintendent appointees. They were elected or they were selected for this racial equity committee from the process of selection by the committee. And so in that way, it's clean. On the other hand, if that's the case, I would really want, so we have Michelle as co-chair, and then Camille would be there, and then so there is, one community member, that's a part of that leadership piece. So that's my only caution or concern there. I don't have any concern whatsoever about whether or not Dr. Bell or Michelle can be independent types of voices that represent the committee well in the interest of the committee. But I just want to highlight that and point that out, the fact that you would have 2 FCPS staff members and 1 community member as part of the leadership for racial equity.
The honor, Sabrina has the bylaws handy, and on the bylaws side, we think, but I would like to do a deeper dive. We don't think there's anything in the bylaws that would preclude FCPS staff from chairing or co-chairing. I think the distinction you make that, Camille, you went through the selection process. Michelle, you went through the selection process that we were just describing, when folks apply. In those ways, it works.
I say optics. I feel like it would be good to have for the chair, co-chair, like a community member staff. I love you guys, so it's nothing a thing, but I feel like I don't know, just being, but I don't think that's in the bylaws now. So I'm if they're the ones volunteering, I can't think, but I'm wondering for optics, if it would be good to sort of have a community member as at least one of either the chair or the co-chair.
So we're back to Denise being the chair, right?
I'd also like to nominate Kurt throw his name into the hat.
I was in for a penny. Penny, not a pound. Penny.
I do want to nominate Kurt as well. Just knowing him in the professional setting and the work he does, at his school as far as equity and elevating kiddos of my historically marginalized populations. I know, Kurt, you are deep into the work. You know the equity work that we do in the professional space. So I'd also like to nominate Kurt as well.
I mean, I'd be happy. We had talked, and my concern is that, chairing it, being cis white gender male, I mean, we've spoken a lot. So I would be willing to take the secretary place. But, and I'll support, I mean, I see it as a team, right? So it's not, and I don't see, but I don't feel right about leading or being in charge of, racial equity committee when I don't have, my cycle of socialization is not that of someone that's been marginalized. I have to look at what, the things I walk into a room with that I don't understand all the time. So I might be open to those things, but I don't know the experience. And so that's my concern, so I would be, and I don't want to say I'll take the thing that you, but
Maybe somehow ended up,
am I getting thrown in?
chair and coach it. Like, I don't know how this happened. I came to one meeting.
She's like, I don't know what I want them to.
I can do her thing. You know what? I'm here to do whatever. I did what I did because I had a strategy, but life is what happens to you when you're busy making up plans. So just love it. Wherever I can be useful, I will go.
So I'm here in chair.
I'm here in chair too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hearing tonight. Yes.
Sure.
Well,
Also, I mean, we do still have to think, Camille, do you want to keep a nomination for one of the positions? Oh,
You're on mute.
We can't hear you.
I thought just now the 3 positions were figured out.
Well, we have.
Oh, I'll step back.
So there's.
I'll step back.
No.
Yeah, there has to be.
No.
So there's
You know,
no contested position. So we just wanted to ask you. You could say no, but we didn't, because your name came up. I didn't want to make that decision for you.
Dr. Bell can co-chair. Go ahead.
Dr. Bell.
I will do whatever it needs to be done.
So it sounds like a vote.
So did Michelle get out of this and she?
You can do it back.
She dropped out hard, right? She said.
No, I bowed out gracefully. That's the way I like to look at it. I gracefully bowed out.
Okay, so Dr. Bell will be co-chair then and not you?
Correct.
So you're gonna be secretaries.
Didn't we just have a secretary?
I just wanted to see.
Okay.
Right, we still have to vote on it, so we're gonna do that, but right now, I have
Need to know what we're voting.
Denise for chair. Uncontested right now. Dr. Bell for co-chair and Kurt for secretary, unless Michelle also wants to put her name, and then we have a contested position. She said no though, so we have Dr. Bell, Denise, and Kurt. And I think once you have the names there, if we could put I don't know how we're gonna get people.
So she can put it in
Or
the
does it
chat.
have to be?
You can put it in the chat.
Well, does it have to be, do our bylaws say it has to be anonymous? I feel like if it doesn't, we can just raise our hands and that would be a lot easier.
Pretty sure we nominated you guys.
Okay, yeah, I didn't think so, yeah, because I was gonna say, I feel like it's more, like, I feel like if it was
Dr. Harris
contested,
is the
people
one
might.
that counted the ballots with Jay Mason.
Yeah, but if it doesn't say we have to, I say we just, you know, it's one thing if it's contested, and then people might not want it, but I'm like, right now it's uncontested. It just might make it easier, since we're hybrid, we weren't hybrid, but we did that.
Yeah, no,
So
we
could
were
just write
hybrid.
things.
Yeah, I don't think it's that. That's how.
Okay, so is everyone comfortable, if anyone's uncomfortable, that's fine, we can do anonymous, but assuming everyone's comfortable. So, do we just do it like that, I guess? Do I have a, okay, I'll just, it doesn't have to be like, what's the thing? Okay, cool. So, so we're saying Denise for chair, so if you're in favor and okay with that, raise your hands. And if you're voting and not, okay, and Artie, I'm assuming you're fine with the 3 positions before you jump off, though.
Correct. Yep, in full support.
And we'll just do this quickly. Co-chair, Dr. Bell, raise your hand. You're in favor. And for secretary treasurer, raise your hand. Awesome. So we have our new officers elected. Congratulations. Thank you. And as we said, we're not going to like ditch you, so you still have us available as a resource. So we're not going to just like run away, but very excited to have new leadership.
We also give a huge thanks to all of you.
Yeah, I will be calling the 2 of you immediately after this meeting.
What did you
What did she say?
I said I will be calling the 2 of you immediately after this
We're here for you. We're here for you.
meeting. All right now. Y'all keep listening.
Okay.
I need y'all to keep an eye on Dr. Harris. Make sure, I'm good.
Good.
Okay, so we,
Yeah, we did want to take a moment to recognize, even though they're not here in person with us, our SOCA graduates who will be graduating in several weeks. Nicole, Mara, Promise, Sydney, and Afnan. Congratulations to the class of 2023. And then we wanted to give a
Lisa,
yes.
can you send me those student names so I can send them a nice special thank you?
Yeah, no, that would be great. Thank you. So, I feel like I had to play Boys to Men in the background. It's so fun. Thank you to those who have been serving. Oh my goodness. Like back in the day when, way back in the day in 2020, when we were going through it and the whole, not that racism has been around since day 1, but really when our country just got lit up. I mean, y'all have been here with us, like since day 1 here in FCPS's Racial Equity Committee. So just a huge thank you, because we have been in it, been through it. I mean, all the things. And I just like, I will never forget this experience with you all. I mean, we started back in the day with Marv and Jay and online and all the things. So huge shout out to those who have been here since day 1, Shanita, Sarah, Ivania,
They're leaving us.
and Tia. Tia is usually up there. I don't know where she is today. Tia as well. Just like thank you all on behalf of our committee as a whole. We have like a little gift for you and a little certificate of appreciation. Thank you.
I was trying to put Sarah in the ring, but.
Yeah, she's like, my girl, my
We got her, these are like a day apart.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And thank you for being our community liaison. We also need her position in place, guys, so think about who wants to take over.
Maybe that's the
when we
first
know
order of
everything's
business,
in
to
good
change the
hands.
bylaws from the community liaison as part of the executive, so that it has to be voted on every year.
And then we also wanted to give a shout out to those who are ending their term. Our student member of the board, Lucas, who I know usually usually joins us online, but we'll make sure we get that to him. Constance and Sharika, who was joining us tonight, was on a little bit earlier. Thank you to them because they'll be ending their term.
So we also want to take a moment to recognize our fearless leaders, Keisha, Elisa, and Dawn. It has been an absolute honor to serve with you guys on this committee. You remember how, you remember how painful actually it was for me to have to step off this committee for a year. And your work has been tireless. Your commitment to racial justice has been endless. I didn't know that you were staying on the committee, and I'm thrilled. I was really, I hoped and knew that we would stay friends, but to be able to continue to see you at the Racial Equity Committee, and for you to be able to mentor our officers who are coming in, I think is tremendous. All three of you mean a lot to me, and I think mean a lot to each person on this committee. You've done incredible work. We want to, locally there's the Take Root store, and we wanted to give each of you a plant to honor your time on the committee. So, this is for you.
Oh my God.
There are two inside And actually, yes, we got plants that are relatively easy to take care of, so that's also
The plant must be so happy right now.
a little hard to explain how to take care of them. So,
Perfect.
yeah. That's the most important part. But thank you guys.
Thank you. And it's been a pleasure to serve, and we're excited to continue on the committee. And we got through our whole agenda, with like 30 minutes to spare. So.
Thank you all. That's a wrap. Here's a wrap.